Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, Paul. Our recording day today is actually March 17, St. Patrick's Day. And so I have brought on an Irishman to talk about why we celebrate St. Patrick's Day briefly, and then talk a lot about poverty in the world. Because you see, my guest today is a very fortunate cancer survivor, Nick Jordan, who we spoke with just a couple of months ago. And Nick is CEO and founder of Wells of Life, a group that is committed to bringing clean water to 1,000 communities in Uganda and beyond. And as that dream is about to come true at the end of this year, 2022, we are called Marching to a Million. What that means is not only will we serve 1,000 community villages, but that effort means that we will provide access to safe and clean water to 1 million people. I don't think any of us had any of that in mind, or we did, but it was a daydream, and now it's a reality. It has taken us 12 years to get here, and to get to 1 million people, and now our plan is to reach 2 million people in the next 3 to 4 years. So we have sort of an aggressive strategic plan, and we're going to talk all about that, all about how we're changing the world for poverty, water, women's rights, children's rights, sanitation, hygiene, just incredible things we are doing in Uganda, in Africa. Now, our guest, Nick Jordan, born and raised and educated in Ireland, holds a bachelor's degree from University College Dublin. And with that, let's bring Nick Jordan on the show. Welcome, Nick. It's great to have you back on the next chapter with Charlie.
Charlie, it's a real pleasure to be here, especially on the Feast of St. Patrick.
On the Feast of St. Patrick. Now, is it a feast or a fest?
It's probably a little of both. And, I've been celebrating St. Patrick's Day now for over 6 decades, so I'm very familiar with the pageantry. And, of course, we always give a special nod to St. Patrick, who is reputed to have brought Christianity to the island of Ireland. And as legend has it, apparently he also rid the island of snakes, but we're not quite sure about that one.
Not quite sure, but let's, since the myth goes on, we will continue with the myth. And so when you celebrate today, do you plan on celebrating St. Paddy's Day today?
Well, as soon as you release me from here, I do believe I will probably find myself a little bar stool somewhere and maybe sing a few songs and tell a few stories about the old country.
In an Irish pub drinking Guinness, is that what you drink?
That's my favorite drink.
Now, Guinness, is that the dark one?
That's affectionately known on the island as Mother's Milk. It's a pasteurised stout that's brewed in St. James's Gate in Dublin, dating back to 1774.
Seriously? Oh, my goodness. And you don't, I like the way you drink beer. You don't, I mean, in the containers, you don't have these little glasses. You have pints that are literally, isn't it 2 pints in a quart? So you drink a quart with 2 glasses, or is 4 pints in a quart?
Well, Charlie, we drink them one at a time, and we normally drink them slowly. And, a reasonable night's work is about 4 to 6 pints, and then you really can solve the problems of the world, especially after about the 6th pint.
Yeah. And I'm kind of questioning this Irish drinking slowly. I don't, maybe to the older conservative guys. But I remember my day in St. Paddy's, there was nothing slow about it. We jumped right into it. The last time you were on the show, Nick, was just a couple of months ago, and it was a whole different kind of conversation. And we talked about your year-long plus battle with colon and lung cancer and how you are now cancer-free. Any updates on that?
Well, it's in the rear-view mirror, Charlie, and I really am sitting here feeling strong, healthy, probably above all things, thankful, grateful, and very mindful of how valuable today is, because that's all that's guaranteed.
That's that it really does take an experience like that to appreciate the day, because we live, as you and I have talked about, we live in this it's not a new phrase, but we live in this tyranny of the urgent, and everything must be done so quickly, and in the process of living an urgent life, we forget about living an involved and excited and adventurous life, because we're just too busy doing what you and I call GSD, getting stuff done, but stuff can be translated as another word. But we get stuff done, and you get stuff done. In the midst of getting stuff done, you lose track of the day, and you lose track of what's important, don't you?
Yes, you do, and that's a wake-up call that I would not wish on anybody. But I can assure you, a person like myself doesn't ask for a second wake-up call. I mean, we do see the world differently. I think I told you on the last conversation we had was that I really saw the stars in all their magnificence and glory for the first time. You do tend to take a little time to smell the roses, maybe even plant a few roses if you don't have any. And I just find it has so much upsides. You can see everything is glass half full, I think. But having cancer and having dealt with it for a year, and having been surrounded by wonderful wife, and family, and children and friends, came to the realization that we all sail on the ship of many people, and probably one of the most fortunate and happiest men around right now, just to have gotten on the other side of that. And I never stop thanking myself for staying positive, and for those who really lifted me up when I needed lifting. So I'm a happy man today on St. Patrick's Day.
What do you're saying happy about yourself and pleased about you? What contributed to that? What contributed to a positive attitude? How do you have, because I know so many people that are so disconcerted and so downhearted over it, and yet you didn't seem, you would have your moments, of course, but you didn't seem to have that. To what do you attribute that?
I think what I would refer to as clarity. I've always had a reasonably good view of what lay ahead, and what I wanted to work on and achieve. The happiness, I believe, came from just having an attitude of gratitude, and realizing that to be thankful, it's almost like priming the pump for a good feeling, and that good feeling does flow over. Well, it flowed over me when I gave thanks for the little things that I had, like my wife, my sons, my family, my church, my faith, obviously wells of life, so many donors, and of course, I guess, as you said, almost 1 million people in Uganda that made me believe that I was important and that I was loved more than anything else. So I guess I found out in a lot of convincing ways that I'm loved by a lot of people. And I also love myself.
You use this, I think it's an application, I'm not sure, I know it's on email, that your wife got started, called Caring Bridge. And there were a lot of people that wanted to know that Michelle religiously put updates and let us know how you were doing. And that connected you with a lot of people one-on-one. Then you had your normal connection of people one-on-one. And add to that, you had literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people in Uganda praying for you. So, I mean, your support system was humongous. I mean, how did that impact?
Well, just to say, I agree with you wholeheartedly about the Caring Bridge, because we have a terrific friend right now that is going through the same type of battle, except it's a different form of cancer. And it's incredible to be able to receive an update on Caring Bridge, because, it cuts through all of the clutter, as you mentioned, all of the busyness and all that's happening. But when that report comes in, you instantly read it, and it resonates. And, it allows my wife and I, Michelle, to stop for a few moments and pray for that person, to pray for their healing. And, because we're all so busy, I'm not sure without that application we'd be able to get as timely an updates as we get, by just checking it when that ping goes off that says there's a new update.
the relational aspect is huge in this recovery process and the gratitude process. Is that right?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, I suppose you could imagine that, when you're suffering the challenges of cancer, it's almost like you're in a dark tunnel, because a lot of things are dark, because you've confronted, and if you're wise, you'll confront the fact that you may not make it through. You may die. And so the light that shines into that tunnel is everything you described. Of course, it's the Lord's love, but it's the Lord's love that shines through people that go the extra mile for you.
Precisely. Yeah, it is. The Lord's love shines through people. So let's switch just a little bit, because I want to get on to the topic of today's show, and that was, you brought to my attention that it was 5 years ago, 2017, 5 years ago, almost to this date, that you and I first met on The Next Chapter with Charlie. I didn't know you from a poll. I had no idea what a Nick Jordan was, except, and do you know what show you were in my list of shows?
122?
You were 2.
Oh, okay.
In the very beginning, you were the second show that I ever did. I almost listened to it again just out of curiosity what it was about.
Wow.
And you were recommended as a guest. I think producer Paul, brought you in, heard you in another podcast, and said it would be wonderful for you to talk about Next Chapter and what you could do in your life afterward. And in that 45-minute or so conversation, you were so engaging and so compelling that I ended up donating 3 wells immediately, and then a 4th almost after. So we were in for a little bit of money at the time, and then 5 months after that, I became a board member of the executive board. So it was fast running. You know what? I guess what I want to say is, because everybody who is in here knows I drink Monster drinks during the show, and I'm kind of curious, what the hell did you put into my Monster drink?
It was already in you, Charlie. I maybe stirred it a little bit and maybe activated it, but whatever it was, you already had it. I think you were just maybe waiting for the right moment to make the connection.
That's interesting. That what about other people that are donors? Do you think they are potential donors? Do you think they have it in them and they're waiting? Do you think they don't have that in them? How does that work?
That's a really great question. One of your many great questions. I will have to say that I believe everybody has it within them to serve, to be more than, the sum of their parts, to reach out and, to offer a helping hand to others. I think so many put it off to another time, and we know all the reasons. What happened in relation to yourself and to the original podcast, I'm very clear about what happened, because I've used it as a reference point for so many years now, almost a what if this could happen again? Would lightning or could lightning strike twice? Because the story of Wells of Life is very much charted and almost bookmarked by your journey through it. And as you alluded to, you began with the donation of a couple of wells. Even if it was one well, that would have been a huge start. But you already were an advanced student and you started with 3. But what happened in the interim, and we all know that 5 years is a half a decade. And as we get older, they go quickly. But what happened in your life and in the life of Wells of Life is very special. And, I want to say that because I don't take anything for granted anymore. Donors come and donors go. Many causes, as many as you want to name. Wells of Life, although a good cause, is yet one more amongst thousands. So what you did when you came and saw Wells of Life was, I think the perfect timing happened in your life. You just grabbed on to what you truly believed was an opportunity. But then you didn't just hold on, you actually made something of that opportunity by offering your time, your talent, and lots of your treasure. And in the 5 years, you can tell your listeners better than I, what happened in the 5 years from 2017 to 2022, I believe Wells of Life came of age. I believe it, I won't continue with my statement except to say that it was though somebody handed you, a baton in a relay race and said, "Run, Charlie, run." And you've been running since.
Yeah, and I think I think it was just a matter of timing. I wouldn't accredit so much to me. I think it was a matter of timing that everything seemed to be coming together at that time. There seemed to be a perfect storm in the good way. A lot of things coming together at the same time. That, for instance, when I came on, we had one employee. We had Adrian. We had our country director. He wasn't even a country director. He was operations manager, riding around on a motorcycle and checking out wells. And today we just hired our 18th person. In 5 years, we've gone from one person to 18 in Uganda. Everybody native Ugandan, except for Adrian, our country director, is Romanian, but he has no intention of leaving Uganda. He sees himself there for at least the next decade and is very committed to Uganda. But there was huge growth that happened at that. And, one thing that producer Paul mentioned before the show and that he was talking that I think is really important for people to know with regard to charity, there are two aspects to a company there is the operations, there's the actual giving, doing the work, whatever your ministry or your calling is, there's the actual doing it. And then there's an equally important, and sometimes certainly equally important, support system that has to support them. They have a support system within the country. We have a support system in Uganda, but we have a whole support system in the United States, in the Republic of Ireland, that takes to support that. And I want to talk about that in just a bit. But I want to talk about some other things that occurred to me. So I'm going to kind of ramble a little bit because I'm in the rambling mood. Compared to 2017, how would you describe Wells of Life now compared to then? Is that a difficult question?
No, it's a very easy question, actually, because, one of the things that we do very well at Wells of Life is that we measure. We believe that in order to chart your progress, you have to be able to measure what you're actually achieving. And, the easiest metrics to see how we're doing is, how many wells did we fund this year? I would really be stretched to remember 2017, but I'm going to guess it was somewhere between 50 and 60 wells. So in 2017, Charlie, when you joined Wells of Life, we effectively brought water to about 60,000 people. That's a lot of water and a lot of people, and it was an amazing year. This year, we're going to bring water to 200,000 people, which everybody knows is almost 250,000 people. A lot of water. Now, what else has changed is, and you rightly pointed out to it, you are only as good as your infrastructure. What's changed at Wells of Life is the infrastructure that supports the delivery of what we do, which is providing new wells, repairing broken and abandoned wells, and essentially teaching our Healthy Village program, which is also known as WASH. All of those are now operating at a tremendously efficient level. You've mentioned that there's a staff of 18 people involved,
in Uganda,
highly qualified and highly educated professionals that are the top of their field. So then the only thing that's remaining here for me to say is the level of support and interest currently in Wells of Life and the work we do is at such a high level that it's almost impossible to keep up with, because, when an organization becomes very successful, suddenly it seems like everybody is talking about that organization. And that is indeed the case right now, having been amongst the top 5 fundraisers for last year, as recounted in the Orange County Business Journal. We went from being one of, I would say, maybe 500 charities in Orange County to essentially being in the top 5. Now, how did we possibly do that? We did it because people are hearing the story. You tell the story maybe 5 times a day, and everybody within the Wells of Life family, they're telling the story. Now, what is the story? Well, of course, it's very simple. It's bringing water to those in need in the most cost-effective and efficient manner possible. That's what Wells of Life has done and perfected over its, as you said, 12 years of providing water. We are now rightfully amongst the top 10 NGOs providing water in Uganda. So the difference is a difference of maturity. We've matured as an organization. The difference is we've taken the knowledge that we've learned from a lot of trial and error and hard work, and we've really put that knowledge to great use, being as good as we possibly can be, and setting excellence as our minimum standard. And I believe, and I'd like you to agree with me on this, that we have only just scratched the surface and begun as an organization.
Well, any organization that is talking about doubling in 3 years, I think, is admitting we've only scratched the surface, and we look in the next 5 years to be doing so much more because the need just never ceases. I have some statistics that are shocking to people because where we work, it's important to know. I wish we had more photographs of the downsides of the villages. They're mud huts. They have dirt floorings, no water, no electricity, no gas, no toilets, no anything. And to get there is not on a smooth paved road. It's on a bumpy, rutty road. I mean, so we're out in the outskirts of the country. And here's a couple stats I found from all the way back from 2017 that I still like. That are still applicable, and that is more than 1 billion people lack access to clean water. That's what, an eighth of the population or something like that. It's out of 9, and 2.4 billion people lack access to a toilet. That's 1/3 of the global population does not have a toilet. And that means they're using bushes, water streams, wherever they're doing it. It's contaminating all of their water sources. And what we are providing, in addition to water, we are providing latrines, hand washing stations. We're solving infant mortality rates. I have some numbers that I want to talk about. And some of these numbers we have in our Healthy Village program. We have that includes water. We have in the villages that we worked with, and this was from numbers from 2020 because our numbers are all upside down with COVID. 89% improvement in access to clean water in the villages that we worked with. 67% improvement in latrine coverage. 91% of the people no longer practice open defecation. 44% of the people are doing hand washing, and there is a 37% decrease in infant diarrhea. When I was just there, I was just there a couple of weeks ago, and I was in one village and speaking with the chairman of the village, and this is anecdotal, so I don't have data to support this. This was just talking to a village leader and asked him, since we've done the Well and the Healthy Village program, what is your hospitalization rate like for cholera, dysentery, diarrhea, which are waterborne diseases? And he said 0. We used to have, and remember when we go to the village and say, how many of you have gone to the hospital for upset stomachs or some kind of thing, and you'd get 75 to 90% of the people raising their hands?
Yes. And
now nobody's raising their hands because of it. You're changing the life. But there's 2 parts of our giving that are really important for our listeners to catch. And one part is what we call restricted and unrestricted. Restricted, if you give money to a well, If you give money to a healthy village program, 100 or restoring a well, we also restore wells because people have wells that were dug by some other organization and they just left and the well broke and these people are once had water, no longer have water. We go in and repair those. That 100% of your funds will be used for reclaiming or building those infrastructures. So not many organizations can say 100% of your funds. Now, we have another side, and then I'll let you talk about these two areas. It's called Unrestricted Funds, and that's to run our organization. And I call these the unheralded people. You don't get the well books. You don't get the little plaques. You don't get all the nice little attributes. But what you get is that you're supporting the running of this organization. You're supporting this organization in that the organization can produce the effects that we have to that we want to do. Tom, tell me about this, the restricted and unrestricted giving that is so critical in our company.
I'm going to tell you briefly, Charlie, because you told me that I could ask you a few questions, and I have a few that are coming to mind.
Oh, good.
I am going to answer your question. Every charity has challenges. And the biggest challenge today is that the first question most charities are asked is, how much of my dollar is going to do the work that you tell me it's going to do? And there's nothing different about that. So Wells of Life from day one was set up to where 100% of funds that are donated to drill a well, maintain a well, repair a well, or provide a healthy village program goes strictly to that. And, we have 61 people that are doing exactly what you described. They are writing a check on a 5-year commitment called a legacy gift that essentially runs the majority of our organization. So it makes for a very simple and a very clean.
Now that's separate from the restricted funds that 100% goes. This 100% goes to operations.
Yes, we have an unrestricted and restricted. And what I was referring to with the unrestricted is a part of it is called our legacy gift funds, which is a 5-year commitment. And then the rest of it, of course, comes in when donors bless us with a gift, a donation. It might be a stock donation. It might just be people put us in their will. And it might simply be that they decide when they hear your podcast that this is a great cause and that they want to send a check. Which, kind of reminds me that you were retired, Charlie, effectively when we met back in 2017. Is that right?
I was.
Okay, and like most retired people, I imagine, you had some interests that you, after a lifetime of being a career executive, were going to pursue. Is that right?
I was looking, yes. I was in the searching phase. It was a very difficult time. That retirement time was a very difficult time. And of what I called boredom, feelings of boredom and uselessness. And I was looking for something I could pour my energy into that was consistent with what I had been preparing to do my whole life. That's why Wells of Life worked so well, because the skills that I used in business were skills that I could use with Wells of Life.
Okay, I'll accept that as a terrific answer. But I'm going to probe just a little bit deeper because,
Sure.
What you have done is so far above and beyond what I think we could have to lay down as the norm. I mean, a lot of people will find an organization, they will give it some consideration, and they'll certainly, if they have the means, they'll give it some donations. But what you did was you effectively went back to work. You might as well say that you're full-time involved in Wells of Life, because based on the number of times I hear from you during the course of any business week, you're working around the clock. Now, why would an executive that can put their feet up or go and play golf or paint or do 1,000 things that you, I'm sure, might have had on your bucket list, why would you donate so much time and so much intellectual energy to Wells of Life? What is it that just got that gear turning for you?
That's a great question, Nick, and I think it's. I just can't take credit for that, because every career I have has been a service-oriented career. I've never been in a career that's in it for let's make money. It was in for making differences in people's lives. And, I was an executive coach, trainer, baseball coach. Everything was working with people and helping people. And so whatever came up in my post-retirement had to be part of giving. And this was a chance to give in a very different way, in a very significant way. Like producer Paul brought up, I like that when you give to a well, you're giving to something very tangible. If I give to, like my mother died of heart disease, if I give to the Heart Foundation, which is wonderful, I'm not saying don't give to the Heart Foundation. I don't know exactly what my gift did, what exactly it impacted. This way, I do know when I fund a well, I know that 1,000 people are going to get water, and there's going to be 150 families that, because we're really starting to moving more into households than just people, but that 150 households' lives are better.
Okay. So, Charlie, I've been able to watch pretty much on a sometimes daily, definitely weekly basis, your journey through wells of life. Now, as you pointed out before the start of the program, we didn't know each other. And so I got to take a trip with you to Uganda. And as we both know, that if you want to get to know somebody, go and spend 8 or 10 days with them abroad, because you're going to be with them literally around the clock.
Or sit next to them and coach for 16 hours.
Correct. Right. So what I saw was, I saw you in Uganda, and I really saw you process for the first time, I am going to imagine, what poverty really looked and felt like. I have this incredible image of you standing on the front steps of a little orphanage, and this would have been in 2018. And I think it has to be one of the most moving memories that I have, seeing you pour out your heart to connect with these little tiny orphans that you probably thought back then you might never see again. Tell me about that connection, Charlie, because it really affected me.
Yeah, that's interesting. You would bring up Grace Orphanage. It's called Faith Orphanage, but it's run by Grace, and so we always call it Grace Orphanage. With my discombobulated childhood, I had a residence, but I didn't have a home. I was pretty much orphaned, moved from one place to another place to another place without any place that was home. And so I could identify with orphans very strongly. And so when I saw these kids and the happiness of these kids, my life was turned upside down. And we have reshaped that orphanage. We have built buildings and bought land to do farming and refrigerators and stoves and beds, and it's a great thrill of my life. And you want to know something really great? Grace and Noah. This is a person who leads the orphanage, and they have about 40 children. She was pregnant with her second child, and I just spoke with her on the phone 2 days ago, and she had a boy, and she named the boy Charlie.
You have got to be kidding.
No.
Well, what a part of your legacy. Well, no, that right there takes me back to remembering. I could feel the compassion and the humanity, pouring out of you in that desolate place, which is miles from almost anywhere. So I wanted to just also say that, you've obviously done several hundred podcasts here, and you engage people and you bring the best out of them, and I would be the first one to say that you make an interview a conversation. You make it fun to be sitting here, and what comes out as a result, hopefully, inspires some of the listeners. And there's a reason why it's called The Next Chapter and Turning the Page, as producer Paul likes to say. But what a lot of people would not know is the remarkable change that you have brought about because of your involvement in Wells of Life. I mean, I could rattle them off. Obviously, you went to Uganda and you became a trustee of our organization in Uganda. Very kindly did that. You returned to the United States, and I know your listeners are going to get a smile here because I want to give them a good laugh on St. Patrick's Day. And I think you began a legacy donor as a $10,000 donor. And I think I asked you to be a $20,000 donor, and I think you agreed. And And then I think I came back again very boldly and asked you to be a $30,000 donor. And you were probably getting a little tired of me, but you actually were very kind. You have continued, Charlie, to give and to pour out of yourself almost, to a fault where I'm not sure how much more you can actually give an organization and still maintain, a family, be a husband, and have some sort of a social life. So I'm honestly honored to be working alongside you. And I just think that your listeners must be so incredibly, moved by one conversation that took place 5 years ago that today is affecting the lives of, let's face it, over 830,000 people.
Today.
Yes. And so what I want to say is, because you won't say it, you're certainly not going to toot your own horn, but, I have no problem here. You can't really cut me off because I'm in mid-sentence. But, you are creating a legacy, you, Pam, and Austin, that is going to echo in eternity because you care about those that are marginalized, those that have no voice, no way of asking for help. And let's face it, if you're a 5 or a 6 or a 7-year-old little child, the only thing you should worry about is splashing in water. You shouldn't be challenged by the fact of having to drink contaminated water because your mother has no choice, no other choice but to give that to you. So I'm, just saying very plainly that you're creating a legacy that is so powerful. And like Wells of Life, I know you're only getting started because the amount of ideas that are flowing from that incredible brain of yours on any given week are amazing. So this is an Irishman on St. Patrick's Day saying, Charlie Hedges, you are amazing. I'm so proud. I get to call you my friend. And, that was really worth the price of the interview 5 years ago because we have become friends working alongside one another. We're probably, maybe you would agree that you're more introvert and I'm more extrovert, which is what's really wonderful because it makes both of us very effective together. We're able to complement one another. And the last thing I want to say is this. You helped me out in Uganda in 2018 because being an Irishman, being out in the equatorial sun is not a really good idea. Now, I know you're laughing.
You were not good in sun.
Let me explain to your listeners what actually happened. So I got such a roasting. My face was crisp. And I had a speaking engagement. This was a Saturday afternoon. I had a speaking engagement at a church on Sunday. Now, Charlie will, I'm sure by self-admission, simply say that, he did not do an awful lot of public speaking engagements in his latter years. Now, he was put in a situation where he had no choice when he saw me lying in bed looking like a tomato, but pick up the opportunity and go to that church, to Father Max's St. John the Baptist Church, and spoke, from what I heard, beautifully. And I think that just opened the door. Charlie, would you agree? And you've been speaking publicly about Wells of Life, and I'm sure a whole lot more ever since.
Yeah, I think that did open the door. That I had an anxiety disorder that I just, fortunately I had a translator, so that kind of helped. But I was quite vocal, and it worked well. I think what we do, Nick, is I think we rise to the need. When God puts in our heart that there is a need and that there is a group of people, and then you get to be fortunate like me that since I'm now running Ugandan operations and go to Uganda 2 to 3 times a year, I get to see the people. I get to talk to our staff who are impacting people. I get to talk to the people that are being impacted. And so, I get very hands-on sights that a lot of people don't get. You sort of rise to this call, and I do believe it's an internal call. Me and my relationship with God, I believe God puts it on our heart. And when it's put on our heart, we need not to ignore, but to jump into it and do something about it.
What would you say, Charlie, was the most beautiful moment that you experienced through Wells of Life in the past 5 years? Putting you on the spot in case something pops out.
Most beautiful moment.
Right. An incredible memory that's going to stay with you for a long time.
It has to do with going to so many villages and meeting so many villagers and seeing the joy on their face. It is incomparable. People that didn't have water and that were dying, the infant mortality rate. We changed the infant mortality rate. I had one of my stats here.
50%, Charlie. We lower infant mortality 50% by providing a water well.
Yeah, and we decreased infant diarrhea by 37%,
which is the main cause of death in a 1 to 5 year old child.
Yeah, and do you know where that comes from? Failure to wash hands.
Correct.
That comes from 50% of them are failure to wash hands, and we provide hand washing stations with liquid soap. And the hand washing stations are right outside the latrines. They're in the schools. We have 1,000 gallon tanks that fill water to wash hands. And so, our goal is this whole person. I think part of what we're trying to do that I really like is giving dignity back to the people. Right. And that we are very, very clear that once we quit drilling, this is not our well. This is your well. And you are responsible. We will help you maintain it. We want that well to be sustainable for 15 to 20 years, and that we will help maintain it, but you've got to be a part of it. You're responsible for it. This is yours, and it gives dignity back to the people, where charity takes away dignity.
Yes, and we don't like using that word charity, because that definitely... it makes some assumptions that I don't think that, we would agree with.
I agree with you.
I want to ask you just one more question, if you'll allow me, and that is, why do you think we still have a water crisis? Why do you think there's still 1 billion people foraging for the most basic and essential need for life on Earth today?
No one knows. How many people know that, Nick?
Well, you mean how many people know that there's 1 billion people needing water?
Yeah.
Well, I think every piece of information, is readily available today. I don't think it's a secret that.
But it doesn't hit the news.
Right.
It doesn't. It doesn't hit the main report. So you don't know. You don't know that failure to have access to clean water is the number one root of poverty.
Right.
And the problem is it is, in most cases, it is so fixable. The water is not that deep, and it's just a matter of a couple bucks. It's just, I hate to put it that way, but it's really, it just comes down to a couple dollars, and your money. That's one thing that I have found. We give to the United States, we give to a lot of organizations in the United States, but the majority of our giving goes overseas, and the bang for your buck is so much bigger because of the exchange of currency. Right. That you can get so much more done, and you're saving so many more lives.
So, Charlie, do you think that it's possible in your lifetime or mine to solve this water crisis where that many people, 1 in 7, lack water? What do you think it would take to solve that huge crisis?
It would take a global effort.
Right.
It would take a global effort.
Like a movement.
Yes, a global movement, yeah. And it would have to be through the United Nations and, the major groups. Although United Nations is taking this on, and this is part of their agenda, but it's just one of their 12 parts of agenda.
Okay. I just wanted to ask that question because some problems seem insurmountable, but this is one that is solvable with enough people joining together and forming a movement. And they may not all be as inspired as Charlie Hedges, but everybody can do something, right?
Oh, there's so many ways that you can serve. We have a Water Warriors program that you could give $50 a month, $100 a month. And you are contributing to, and this is restricted funds. This is it not restricted funds? Oh, it's unrestricted funds. I'm sorry, it's unrestricted funds. But you were supporting the building of and the drilling of wells and the implementation of our Healthy Village program, which brings to schools training, gender relations, hand washing stations. We're building latrines for girls in 5 schools right now, which is just amazing that they can have their own separate facility from the boys.
Charlie, would you say that your trip to Uganda was what made the difference in how involved and how passionate you are about, creating opportunities within Wells of Life?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You see it, and you realize that you're going to stay in 1.5-star hotels, except for the last night we'll put you up in a 5-star hotel.
I remember you came back and you effectively created the annual report, I believe, in about 2019, and your famous quote in there that said, "I will never be the same again after my trip to Uganda." What did you mean by that?
I just see a need that I can do something about. If I can do something about it, if there's a need that I can do something about, I can't change the world, but I can impact my world. And I have to determine what my world is. My world is my family, my community here in the United States, and my world is now Uganda. And that is including, and I can impact the world, and I can do something there. I think something that's really important for our listeners to know is that when it comes to treasure, my son is a professional baseball player, plays for the Cleveland Indians, Cleveland Guardians, and yeah, we'll just leave that be. And he's the starting catcher, and he gives significant money to charity, and he is extraordinarily generous. And it is a lot with his funds that we have been able to do things for Wells of Life. And so Maggie Hedges and Austin Hedges are just tremendous givers to this organization and have made huge impact. And we are so grateful to them and for their caring and their giving.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Charlie, because I was just itching to be able to mention the fact that, Austin and Maggie, because when we have a couple married, it's always husband and wife, and these two are a wonderful couple together. They really are setting a standard for what their generation can do. I mean, to whom much has been given, much is expected. And Austin and Maggie are the perfect example of being good stewards of their good fortune. And even though their name isn't mentioned as often, perhaps, as yours, they are so committed to Wells of Life. It is part of their DNA. And they've been spreading that word, that good news, actually, throughout Major League Baseball. And that's what makes me so happy to believe that there's so many great things about to happen at Wells of Life, especially when you have a star athlete like Austin, as busy as he is. He has fitted Wells of Life and the mission of Wells of Life into his daily life. That, to me, is inspiring.
Thank you. Yeah, he would be very honored to hear that. And he is willing to drop anything and help Wells of Life as much as he can. Let's wrap up our time here together. And I've got a personal question that I want to ask you. After 12 years, how would you say your involvement of Wells of Life has impacted your life personally?
Oh, you're finishing up with a fastball here right down the middle, I can see.
Well, it's down the middle, so hit it.
Okay, well, let me take a swing at it at least. It's impacted my life in the greatest way possible because it's the central core of my life, because it fits in perfectly with my faith in God, my understanding that, we're all created in His image and put on earth for a purpose. The greatest thing that I see in my own life is that I was able to find out 12 years ago that the purpose of me being here is to bring the gift of water to as many people as possible in His name during my time on earth. And so to be able to know without a moment's hesitation or a shred of doubt that that's my life's mission for every day and every hour that I have left on earth, that will be what I will strive to do, to bring people like you into the family of Wells of Life, where we don't take credit. We know that we have been given much, and we feel blessed to be able to do this work, and we see the reward shining through the eyes of children in photograph after photograph. And if you're fortunate, like Charlie, to go to Uganda 3 times a year, you can get a hug from a mother that will not need one word, except she will tell you with that hug that you've saved her child's life. Is there anything more powerful than believing that that's why you were put on earth? If you save one life, as Mother Teresa said, that's a huge gift. What if you've saved perhaps 50,000 lives, Charlie, as you know Wells of Life has done? I'm the most fortunate man that I could possibly be, to be certain that that's why God created me, to lead Wells of Life until whenever He's ready to take me home, and to help it become a global organization where we will get to a point where there will not be one child dying needlessly when water is readily available.
That is the fine objective, and something was just occurring to me. That we are. I think it's important for our listeners to know that are familiar with Christian charities or Christian giving organizations, and to say Wells of Life is a bit different than what your typical Christian organization would give. And a lot of Christian organizations, and that is not Catholic, I'm talking the Protestant Christian organizations, are into proclaiming the word, which I wholly believe in, and I wholly believe it's biblical. But we are the body of Christ, and not all of us are built to be the mouth. And we are not built to be the mouth. We will talk to people about Jesus. We will talk to people about the grace of God and the kindness of God. But we are, what we like to call ourselves, are the hands and feet. We're the answer to prayer. People have been praying for clean water. Jesus is sending us to do that. We're not trying to evangelize. We evangelize not through words, just like through what St. Francis said, evangelize in everything you do, and if you have to, use words. That we do it through our actions, and people see the life of Christ in us by what we do, not by some dogma that we express.
Charlie, do I have one more sentence that I can add?
You may, of course.
Okay, I loved what you said, and I just wanted to maybe just put a little ribbon around it, a green one for St. Patrick's Day. And that is, Wells of Life is an organization that is inclusive. You know, it's not a big statement to make that we're in a somewhat divided world today. But the invitation from Wells of Life is to everyone to come, join us in the mission, as I mentioned earlier, to make sure we create a world where not one child has to die for lack of water. Come families, come schools, come churches, come businesses, come individuals, and join us and make that amazing movement that's going to effectively change the world and how we view water in the world. It's exciting, and I believe it's the invitation that's going to go out again and again and again that says, let's join forces here, because everybody has a place in Wells of Life in solving the world water crisis.
Absolutely. And it will be in the show notes. You can go to www.wellsoflife.org. You can find out all about the work that we are doing, the tremendous work that we are helping, how you can get involved from $50 a month to a $100,000 gift. We will, and every bit of it will be well spent and well documented, and you will know exactly where your money is going, how it's being used. We're very transparent. So it's wellsoflife.org. Check that out and be impressed that God has given this work, and that we feel ourselves fortunate. We are lucky to be able to do what we are doing for the sake of people in great need. That's all I have for today. Nick Jordan, thank you so much for being on, and thank you for questioning me. I wasn't ready for all your questions.
You answered wonderfully, Charlie.
Yes, I didn't know. I know I could be a host. I didn't know if I could be a guest. So that's it for today, everybody. This is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.